The Carolina Hurricanes are in their 25th season. And with that, the Carolina Hurricanes have a lot of what if scenarios that have happened throughout the years. In today's episode, I will be joined by Colin as we discuss all of those what if scenarios.
You're Locked On Hurricanes, your daily podcast on the Carolina Hurricanes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, Caniacs. I am, of course, your host, Jared Ellis, and you're listening to Locked On Hurricanes on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And as always, thank you for making Locked On Hurricanes your first listen of the day. And in today's episode, I am joined by Colin from the Home Ice Advantage podcast. He is the Canes historian on Twitter. How are you doing today, Colin?
I'm doing pretty well. I would put a huge asterisk
Yeah.
after Kane's historian, though.
Yeah, I know. But you are the guy with all the facts, though. So
I try.
yeah. But yeah, a while back, I just on a whim posted, just a what if scenario, and that's the one we'll start off with today. And it just really popped off way more than I was expecting it to. I was just doing it as a little fun thing. And I asked the question of what if Frederik Andersen signed whenever he was drafted by the Hurricanes back in 2010. And this is obviously all what if scenarios. This could have went a million different ways for all of these questions. But let's say the same regime was still in place. I don't know how good Freddie ends up being, because if we look at that regime from that time period, especially, you get past 2010 to like the 2012, 2013, range, not great. So yeah, obviously, he could have turned out to be fantastic, but I don't think we see the same Frederik Andersen that we see today if he signed with the Hurricanes back then. I think I don't know if that would have been best for his career.
You're 100% right on that, first of all. When you actually go back and look at it, Jimmy Rutherford was talking about how he should have been the NHL backup that year. Freddie Andersen was not ready to be an NHL backup, so they would have just destroyed his career potential.
Mm-hmm.
It's also, we had a giant, when we drafted Freddie in the summer, we had this huge pipeline of goalies that diminished to almost nothing 5 games into the season.
Yeah.
So he would have gotten NHL ice time.
Yeah, and it just wasn't best for his career. Obviously, it's fun, to look back at those pictures, like that draft picture I posted. It's a weird fever dream, obviously, and then the training camp pictures and stuff like that, from that time period. It's obviously fun to go back and look at, but yeah, at the end of the day, it was not best for his career. And ultimately, I think he made the right decision by opting not to sign and then getting drafted again by Anaheim a couple years later. And then, playing with Anaheim, winning a Jennings there, going up to Toronto after that, and then eventually finding his way back to Raleigh, winning another Jennings trophy. But you also chimed in with 2 questions. The first being, what if Keith Primeau hadn't held out and we never made the trade for Brind'amour? That is one, in my opinion, where I don't know what this franchise as a whole looks like at that point, because I've said many times over the course of this show that Rod Brind'amour is the Hurricanes. He's been here through almost all of it, whether it be as a player or a coach or whatever. He's been here for almost all of it. I genuinely do not know what this franchise, not just team, franchise looks like, if it's still here or what. I do not know. And it's a weird multiverse question, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, again, you said it at the top, but this is all galaxy braining. We have no idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But when it comes to Rod, I've been kicking this around in my head for a couple months now. What if Keith Primo didn't act like a child and
Mhm.
hold out? And I only say that because he held out multiple times. Like, this was a strategy of Primo, but not my point.
Yeah.
And yeah, the Hurricanes aren't what they are today. So Ron Francis only became captain after Primo left. So
Mhm.
that's one big thing right there. Ron Francis doesn't become captain, at least for several more years. And then Rod Brind'amour, I mean, I don't have to tell anyone who listens to this podcast what he means.
Yeah.
He exactly what you said. He is the Hurricanes.
Mhm.
Like, without him, do we go on that run in 02?
Yeah.
I don't know. Do
Do
we
you go
win
on
the
the
cup
run
in
in
'06?
06?
Yeah. I mean, that's a lot of his leadership.
I
And
know.
maybe 2009 we're just going to ignore because, I mean, Rod is great and I'm not going to besmirch his name. But when you actually look at the numbers too, Primo only ended up playing another I think it was 300 games for the Phillies
Mhm.
before he ultimately had to retire because of concussions. Rod played almost 700 games for us.
Mhm.
So that's an extra 400 games to get out of this deal, all
Yep.
because Peter Kamanos was a child and Keith Primo was a child.
Yep. Yeah, that's just one. This organization does not look the way it does today, and there's genuinely no telling what it looks like. The second question you had is, what if Scott Stevens hadn't hit Shane Willis? That's another one where it's just, one of those things, a lot of other questions, were regarding, if someone stayed healthy. And it's a very it's very weird, because it could have just gone so many different ways. Obviously, everyone knows, how Scott Stevens was back in the day, and yeah, had he not hit Shane Willis, Shane is definitely looked at in a different light. That's for sure.
Yeah. And the reason I find it so interesting is because prior to the hit, Shane Willis was scoring at like
Mhm.
0.6 points per game, which isn't incredible. He's not the next Connor McDavid or Wayne Gretzky at the
Yeah,
time. But that for a depth player, oh my God, like we're going to go
yeah,
places here. And then post hit, I think it was like zero point 0.1. Like it destroyed how he played. And of course it will. After taking a big hit like that, you're going to become more of a defensive player and you're going to be less willing to take risks. And ultimately, that hit can be directly traced to the end of Willis's career.
yeah. And I don't have it in front of me, but how old was he when he got that hit?
I think he was 22 or 23.
Yeah, I was to say I knew he was young too. So
Yeah.
again, if that hadn't happened, again, we're looking at him in a whole different light because, you mentioned what he was scoring at the time for a depth player. He's still, in his early 20s, 4 years down the line, he's, in his mid late 20s, he's
Yeah.
entering his prime, more to say, and who's to say, he moves up from a depth player to a main guy, you don't know. Again, that's the whole situation with this is, it's all big what ifs. But yeah, his career just as a whole would have played out so much differently.
But also, I don't know if he would have stayed long
It
term.
also very true. Again,
Yeah.
so many what ifs, he has that momentum building and then has that momentum, on his side. Then he goes and gets a nice contract, in, I don't, Vancouver or
Yeah.
wherever,
Sure. Wherever. Yeah.
and then, breaks out there and, just continues to develop. But, that doesn't happen.
Also,
Um,
I don't know if he would have come back in the
mhm,
role he has because
yeah.
a lot of people don't realize that. Some people do. Shane Willis is now unreplaceable for development in youth
Hmm.
hockey in North Carolina.
Oh,
Eventually, when
absolutely.
we have that all-star player, maybe we'll never have an Austin Matthews, but a Sebastian Aho from Raleigh could totally happen. And a lot of that's going to be due to Shane Willis because prior to his involvement, our youth hockey participation, and by ours I mean the Hurricanes, was
Yeah,
kind of
no.
terrible. Peter Kamanos was not good at it, and
Yeah.
you can really see the change under Shane Willis.
Yeah, you seriously can. I mean, you have, parents posting all the time on whether it be Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, them being at youth hockey, games and events, whether it be Wake Competition Center back when Raleigh Center Ice was still the place, and all these other places that Shane is almost always there.
Yeah.
And I remember when I went to go pick up my stuff for the 5K this year, Shane was there. And yeah, I know that's more of a community thing, but he's been vital and, like you said, irreplaceable in just growing youth hockey and the Hurricanes' presence in the community. And it's irreplaceable.
Yeah.
And next, Andrew Schnitker, he posted the question of, what if the Canes win Game 82 and make the playoffs in 2011?
This one's tricky because I want to say, we go on this amazing run because to that point, if we made the playoffs, we went on this amazing run.
Mm-hmm.
But no, it wouldn't have changed anything. It would have made the drought a little bit shorter, and maybe I wouldn't refer to it as the Dark Ages anymore. But we would have faced off against Washington that year.
Mm-hmm.
We had no business playing against Washington, and I mean, we would have lost. We just would have lost in the first round. It would have been what it was.
Yeah, honestly, yeah, it's just one of those things. Been fun. The drought would have been less than what it was, but yeah, ultimately that one just doesn't change anything other than more playoff merch.
Yeah.
Outside of that, that doesn't really change anything. Josh Holdner asks, "What if Lindholm never gets traded?" Obviously, that means Dougie Hamilton is never a Hurricane, but it definitely would have been interesting, for sure, because right around that time, you had Rod Brind'amour, and Don Waddell taking over as far as regime change goes, and we see what they are now. Imagine how Lindholm is in this current system, once they really get going. And it would have been very, very interesting because we see how he's panned out in Calgary. So it would have been fun, but ultimately I think it was the right move because we needed a guy like Dougie Hamilton.
I excuse me. I 100% agree with that. It's actually Dougie doesn't get enough credit for his I don't know. I don't want to say attitude, but his attitude towards the fans. Because when he first joined the team, again, we're leaving the Dark Ages. Dundon's just coming aboard. Waddell isn't coming aboard, but he's in a prominent role, and Brind'amour gets promoted. It's so hard to be able to quantify what every player in that time period meant to this team. Mm-hmm. And Dougie Hamilton doesn't get enough credit for it. But
he really does.
I also don't think Lindholm would have stayed long-term either because Waddell, first of all, this is absolutely no offense to the player. Lindholm is a good player, obviously. He wouldn't have been our 1C. That's going to be Aho all day, every day. And we already have such a logjam in the center pipeline. So I guess we don't get Vinny, but also we got Vinny for practically nothing. So I don't know. I'm not mad at it at all. I understand some people are, but I'm not mad at it at all.
Yeah, I'm not mad at it either. Ultimately, it was the right move to make for sure. And, for Lindholm's career, for the Hurricanes' long-term future, it was the right move. But it is a fun what if, for sure, because it's not like, Freddie, if he had signed back in the day, it obviously doesn't destroy his career, obviously, but Lindholm, he doesn't stay long term, but it would have been fun. But ultimately, we made the right move making that trade. And next up, Zach Mitchell asked, "What if the Red Wings didn't match the Fedorov offer sheet?"
I laughed at this one the second I saw it because the Fedorov offer sheet was Peter Kamanos just being a jerk. Like he 100% was just being a jerk to Red Wings owner Mike. I can't remember his last name. He is passed, but wow, that's embarrassing. Anyways,
you're good.
He just did not like the Red Wings owner. They were both tycoons of Detroit business. Kamanos, Comparero. I really don't remember this guy's name. Doesn't matter. He was the CEO of Little Caesars, and they feuded a lot. It apparently all came back down to like Little Caesars said they were going to use Comparero, indoor stores and then didn't, and then ever since Peter Kamanos hated him. So this contract had $14 million in signing bonuses, and then if the team made the Eastern Conference Finals, he would get another $12 million in bonuses. Yeah, it's $26 million in a single year. Like, that's absurd. It was
And that
100%.
was a long time ago. $26 million too.
That's 1998 money. Like, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of $5 pizzas. That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah.
And so if the Red Wings didn't match it, we don't have the money.
Yeah, we don't have the
Peter
money for a lot of
Kamanos-
stuff in that time period.
Yeah, Peter Kamanos was poor. I mean, I understand, like, he's a very rich man, but like,
Yeah.
in their terms of hockey ownership, he
Yeah.
is not. There was a reason why we were always made fun of, and he never spent any money. It's because he didn't have it.
Yeah, I know. It really just comes down to pettiness there. I know a lot of people, talked about the Kotkaniemi offer sheet being petty as well whenever it happened. I know some people still do, but ultimately I think that one was more thought out than this. Folks, the numbers don't lie. In the last decade, over 4 million people have chosen SimpliSafe Home Security to protect their home. You don't earn the trust of that many people without doing something right. At SimpliSafe, your safety is the only thing that matters. With 24/7 professional monitoring, SimpliSafe's agents call you the moment a threat is detected and dispatch police or first responders in an emergency, even if you're not home or can't be reached. SimpliSafe blankets your home in protection with advanced sensors in every room, window, and door. HD security cameras for inside and outside your home, smarter ways to detect motion that only alert you when the threat is ill, and even hazard sensors that instantly detect fires, floods, and other threats to your home. Their monitoring experts use proprietary advanced response technology to visually confirm when a break-in is real, so you get the highest priority police dispatch. So right now, you can customize the perfect system for your home in just a few minutes at simplisafe.com/lockedonnhl. Save 20% on your SimpliSafe security system when you sign up for an interactive monitoring plan and get your first month free. Visit simplisafe.com/lockedonnhl to learn more. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. This one right here.
That one's not petty because they wanted the player. Like
I know.
That's just a Montreal. Their fans. They're not true hockey fans in Montreal, so they don't pay attention to the news. Because it'd been well known that we wanted Kotkaniemi, and then when we had our opportunity, hey, we have money.
Yeah,
let's
we
go
have
get
money.
him.
Yeah, it was just that $20 signing bonus.
Oh, I mean, that was petty. Don't get me wrong. Or the reverse card on Twitter. All of that was petty. But the overall move itself
the deal
was not.
Itself was not, but like the $20 signing bonus, the social media stuff, is still very entertaining though, for sure. And this is the next one. The next question, several people posed this question, so I'm just gonna kind of lump it all into one. What if Yoni Pikkanen was never hurt? How much longer would he have played? Would the icing rule have changed? And that one, the one I just read, comes from at Mr. Rutherford 1106 on Twitter, but several people asked, what if he had stayed healthy?
I don't think it would have made a lasting difference. No offense to Pikkanen, he wasn't a franchise player. But he could have played another 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
And I don't think they would have changed the rule. At least not yet. It would have. Unfortunately, a lot of times in the NHL, it takes incidents like that for rules to be changed.
Yeah.
Because they're just stuck in their ways. No one at the Board of Governors meeting is thinking of the dangers of the icing rule until one of their players get hurt, and then now all of a sudden it's all they want to talk about.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah. Ultimately, maybe he has a few more years left in him, but like you said, it wouldn't have gotten changed, and like you said, sometimes it takes guys getting hurt for things to change like that, regardless of it's hockey, basketball, football, baseball, whatever. But Ultimately, yeah, like you said, I don't think it makes a huge long term uh, impact. Hunter Tyson asks, unfortunately, can't help but wonder what if Adam Fox wasn't so stubborn about wanting to play for New York when he was traded to us.
I used to, I don't want to say hate Adam Fox because, that's a strong word for a man I've never met, but I didn't like him because of this.
Yeah,
He was nicer to us than he was to Calgary because he just straight up told Calgary, I will never play for you. This will not happen. And at least down here, he was like, well, we're talking. We'll see what happens, which was
yeah,
obviously a lie. But I
yeah,
respected that he signed a long-term deal with the Rangers because if he didn't, I would have had a chip on my shoulder until the end of time.
yeah,
But this is a completely different team with Adam Fox on it.
yeah. It
We would have,
really is.
yeah, the TDA thing would have never come up. Would have never happened. Brett Burns
Hmm.
would still be in San Jose. And I mean, what is his current contract worth? Like 9.5, I think.
It's up there. I
Yeah,
know for a fact it's up there.
so who don't we have now? Because we had to pay Adam Fox $9.5 million.
Yeah, I know. You also we just mentioned the Kotkaniemi offer sheet, because
Yeah,
that wasn't cheap.
yeah.
And then him signing that extension, just what happens there? Svechnikov, his long term deal, and all these other guys that we've brought in since then, that have some are still here, some are gone. That yeah, it is a totally different team, and I'd like to think it would be a at least on par with what we have now. But again, like you pay him so much money, like what who isn't here or
Yeah.
who gets traded, Because
Like,
that's a lot of cap room you gotta make free up for that deal.
God forbid they have to trade Jordan Stahl
Oh my
because he
god.
makes a lot of money for, I mean, absolutely no disrespect. Jordan Stahl is currently overpaid. That is true.
Yeah. Yeah, he
But
is.
I'm fine with overpaying him right now because it's Jordan freaking Stahl. I'm fine with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Dougie Hamilton also would have left with absolutely no drama if we had Adam Fox.
Yeah, they would have just been like, okay,
Yeah.
we
Thank you
hate
for
to
your
see you
service. Goodbye.
go, but
Yeah.
all right, It also makes you wonder, what goaltenders do we have?
Yeah.
Are we able to afford, Freddie Anderson what we paid him? If I remember correctly, he's like in the 4 million
I think
range.
4.5.
Yeah, like 4.5. You know, are you can't you may not be able to afford that. Maybe you can still afford Ranta, but maybe you're not able to afford Freddie. But yeah, that's one that really that's a big what if. But next, Nick Bertuzzi asks, "What if Rod wasn't hired as head coach?" Like we said earlier, with the trade, whenever he came here years ago, this is not the same team. This is not the same organization because we all know just how much of an impact he's had in changing the culture around the team on the ice, off the ice. It isn't the same team, that's for sure.
He would definitely still be around.
Oh
I
yeah,
know
for
that
sure.
much.
It's not like he wouldn't be a part of the
Yeah.
organization.
I don't know if he would be, special assistant to Waddell or an assistant or whatever, but he would still be around. But it wouldn't, like, at the time before he agreed to be the coach in 2018. There was a lot about like it could be Daryl Sutter or Barry Trotz who had just come off winning the cup with Washington.
Hmm.
And so overall, I think like we do progress and we eventually make the playoffs. I think
Yeah.
all of that would have still happened, and maybe, fingers crossed, we would be a cup contender today. But part of the magic of Rod is like if you're Sebastian Aho and your coach is coming to talk to you and say it's Daryl Sutter and he's like, hey, this is how you take face-offs. Trust me, I'm like a good coach. It's a lot
Hmm.
different from Rod Brind'amour sitting next to you in your stall, be like, hey man, this is how you need to take face-offs. And then as he's walking away, you look up and see the photo of him with the cup for that very franchise.
Hmm.
So I don't know. Like I said, I don't know if we would have been as good as fast, but I know for a fact the magic of that first year of making the playoffs right at the end and then going on that run that we had no business going on wouldn't have happened. None of that would have happened.
Yeah, it really wouldn't have, and because, so many folks have mentioned it when it comes to playing for this team, whether they're still playing for him, if they've left, whatever, that everyone respects and listens to Rod Brind'amour. He's a player's coach. He's done it. He knows what it takes, like you said, sitting in your stall next to him and saying, "This is how you want to take faceoffs." You look up, there's his picture on the wall hoisting the Stanley Cup. His pictures are everywhere. Like, he knows what he's talking about.
Yeah.
And people listen to him. People respect him. Not saying Daryl Sutter isn't respected. I'm not saying that at all. But Rod Brind'amour did what he's coaching you on, and he knows how to get to his players and get the best out of them. And I think they make the playoffs. If they, again, we're just saying Daryl Sutter, I think they make the playoffs. They're still a playoff team, but does it happen in that first year? I don't know. Remember, January 1st, they're second to last in the league. I don't know if that happens, but ultimately it was the right move. That's for darn sure.
Yeah.
Next up, we got question asking, what if the Canes drafted Erik Karlsson 14th overall instead of Zach Boychuk? I look at this very much like the Freddie Anderson one. You look at the time period it was. Yeah, I don't think it's the Erik Karlsson we saw in Ottawa. Yeah, he hasn't necessarily been the best in San Jose, in my opinion, definitely overpaid. But it's I don't think he's a player that gets overpaid like that. That can get a contract like that if he came into the Hurricanes organization at that time. Again, same thing we were saying about Freddie Anderson. He is not the same player that we ended up seeing.
Yeah. I don't think he would have been as good as he was in Ottawa, and he's clearly taken a step back in San Jose, and that just is what it is. But I think we would have made the playoffs in 2011 if he was on the roster.
Yeah,
that could have happened. So maybe we make the playoffs 2 more times than we would have without him. But ultimately, we're still, the struggling team from a college town that can't do anything right. I don't think it changes the trajectory of the team almost at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, like you said, maybe you get a couple more playoff trips out of it, but he's not the player he was in Ottawa. That's for sure. Because, like we mentioned, the just Hurricanes at the time, they weren't a very good place to be if you're a rookie coming in. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Next up, we got Aaron Cohen asking, what if Brett Hull hadn't redirected that late shot in regulation to tie Game 3 of the 2002 Stanley Cup Final? Oof.
This is a Hurricanes fan of a certain age. They go back to this all the time. And I don't mean that in an insulting way. It's like, I have my things I go back to, and it's like, if 09 had just played out differently. But realistically, we would have never beat that Red Wings team. It was cool that we were there. It was awesome we were there. That's an amazing run. And it brought a ton of fans to the organization from the area. But we had no business beating that Detroit Red Wings. They had, 9 or 10 Hall of Fame players? Not to mention their head coach was Scotty Bowman. No, you had no business beating them whatsoever. Okay, we win Game 3. We still lose. Okay, we still lose.
Yeah. Ultimately, that doesn't change it. Detroit still wins the Stanley Cup. Just those Red Wings teams were ridiculous. Red Wings are still winning the Stanley Cup for sure. I think the real question would have been, what if the Hurricanes hadn't touched the trophy after winning the Eastern Conference Finals and cursed themselves?
I read an interview from Ron Francis from 2 years ago. It was right before the expansion draft, actually. And he was asked, what's the biggest regret of your career? And he literally said, touching that trophy. He was like, I've never lived it down. It comes up all the time. Well, you shouldn't have touched it, bro.
Yeah.
Ron, don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, I know it, but yeah, again, ultimately, yeah, the Red Wings still win that Stanley Cup for sure.
There was
Um,
also a little bit of magic, and that it was Scotty Bowman's last year.
yeah, yeah,
I
that
mean,
is true.
that's just another thing to sprinkle on top that we wouldn't have gotten to it.
Yeah, very true. The Storm Seller asks, "What if Pete had moved the Whalers to Las Vegas?" This is one I thought about a lot. Um, because you look at, all right, it's 97. Uh, yes, you do have that boom of hockey in Southern California with LA, Anaheim, San Jose, with Gretzky coming in, the Mighty Ducks movie, and just all that stuff. Uh, but it hadn't, the boom of non-traditional hockey markets was still a few years away, and it really didn't take off until like within like the past 10 years. But I do kind of look at those early 2000s, with Tampa, or with Dallas winning the cup, Tampa, us, Anaheim, those non-traditional markets. I do kind of look at that as kind of the start of that boom. But I I don't really know if that team succeeds in Vegas, because I know they are the butt of a lot of jokes, but you look at Arizona today. Yeah, they're in
Yep.
that same region as all those Southern California teams, but nobody cares about them. Everyone makes the jokes about the arena that they're playing in now, and that is what it is. But I don't think that team succeeds in Vegas. I think that ultimately it struggles, for sure. Maybe, obviously when it's brand new, everyone's going to it, because it's the new shiny thing. But ultimately, I don't know if it succeeds there, and maybe it ends up getting moved. But yeah, it's one that I don't think it works. I
I'm
think
going
Vegas wasn't
to,
ready.
yeah. So I'm going to rephrase the question slightly from what if Pete had moved the team to what if Gary Bettman allowed Karmanos to move the team then? Because that was his first choice. Karmanos wanted to go to Vegas,
Hmm.
and Karmanos said no. Wow.
Agreed.
Bettman said no.
Hmm.
I mean, he had just come from the NBA, what, 5, 6 years earlier, and the NBA had a ton of gambling controversies at the time. I mean,
Hmm.
it
Yeah.
it cost Michael Jordan, a season. Like that
Yeah.
happened. So Bettman wanted nothing to do with Vegas. But if he had allowed Kamanis to move the team there, I think you're 100% right. It wouldn't have lasted. And it wouldn't have lasted because it's hard to break into a new market like that. And at the time, you would have been the
Hmm.
only professional sport, which works for you. That would help you draw more people. Hockey fans coming from Canada or the West Coast, I'm sorry, or the East Coast to Vegas are going to
Hmm.
come and watch a hockey game because they're used to it. But Peter Kamanos didn't have the money to make that happen.
Yeah.
Just plain and simple. He didn't have the money to make that happen. So maybe the team lasts 4 or 5 years, and then either Peter Kamanos sells the team or has to relocate the team again. It wouldn't have lasted in Vegas long. I also think that Raleigh would have eventually gotten an NHL team either way.
Yeah, it's just a matter of which team it
Yeah,
would have been. But yeah, obviously Vegas does well now.
yeah,
They're obviously were ready whenever they got the Golden Knights, and are ready now. Yeah, but yeah, just at the time, just that area just wasn't. It just wasn't ready for it,
yeah,
and they needed the right team, and at the time that was not the right team. And obviously, you brought up everything with Bettman, so that obviously plays a big part in it as well. But Vegas, they were definitely still a few years, and a few is an understatement,
yeah.
years away
At
from
least two
just,
decades.
yeah, just being ready, for a professional hockey team. I think, obviously NBA, NFL, heck, they're not there yet, but MLB, I think that stuff would have succeeded there at that time. But hockey, I don't
Yeah,
see it succeeding there in the late 90s, early 2000s. Yeah, just that that boom of non-traditional hockey markets just wasn't there yet.
Yeah.
And yeah, it would have been a very fun what if though. That's for sure. But next,